Honor and shame. All human groups enculturate their members into internalized sanctions. Sanctions that keep those members from disrupting the group. The sanctions available to humans run along this spectrum: anxiety, to shame, to guilt. Every society, it seems, emphasizes one of these: anxiety, shame, and guilt. While the other two step into the background. So if you're a society that's tribal, you emphasize anxiety. Shame and guilt step into the background. If you're a society that's individualistic, you're emphasizing guilt as the sanction, as the social control. So, in your society, shame and anxiety step into the background. If you are a society that's collectivistic, then shame is in the foreground, and guilt and anxiety step into the background. It's very interesting, when I first started talking about honor shame here, people were like, no, guilt and shame are the same thing. They're not the same thing. They're not the same thing. When you begin to look at this, you see why they're not. All human beings are anxious about measuring up to standards, meeting expectations, and achieving goals. In some cultures, external controls are more effective, such as public opinion, widespread publicity, and the like. These cultures are described as honor and shame cultures. They require their members to suppress unacceptable social behavior. For example, the book of Proverbs is a handy tool to read. If you read it in a culturally plausible way, you will see that these proverbs really are not for Americans. They're not for guilt culture. They're for shame culture. They are the collected folk wisdom of an honor-shame culture. Inspiration doesn't mean that, oh, every culture can use it the same way, and this, no, it's not wisdom from our culture. It's wisdom from an honor-shame culture. And notice too, when you read it, that the basic patterns of life described in those proverbs tend to be situation-oriented. And those situations belong to the honor-shame culture of the Middle East. Suppression. I know I want to kill this guy when he comes in the room. I'm very aware of it. But I don't kill him, because I know that that would bring shame on my family. That's suppression. Notice, I'm cognizant, I'm aware I want to kill him. In a guilt culture, I want to kill him, but I've repressed it. So whenever he comes in the room, I feel terrible. And maybe I'm not aware that I actually want to kill him, because I'm too enlightened to do that. Right? In this culture. Even a brief reflection of mainstream United States culture should indicate that feelings of honor and shame do not exert powerful control over our social behavior. In recent memory, a president was forced to resign from office under shameful circumstances. But one would hardly know that from the words spoken and subsequent behavior of that same individual. A subsequent administration experienced the highest number of indictments in United States history of its members in various courts. Yet some of these individuals have returned to play another role in the American game known as politics. And remember this guy? Obviously, we're not an honor-shame society, are we? The more significant and effective social control of human behavior in mainstream United States culture is believed to be a sense of guilt. In this culture, individuals are required to repress, not suppress, repress unacceptable social behavior. Here, internal controls are more important than external controls. Right, Mr. Walter White? Or should I say, Heisenberg? And the basic patterns of life here in this culture tend to be individual-centered, which is quite in keeping with mainstream United States culture, the most individualistic culture that has ever existed in the history of humankind. So repression versus suppression again. Repression is a psychological defense mechanism, an attempt to keep information out of conscious awareness. However, these memories don't just disappear. Oh, they continue to actively influence our behavior. But some cultures, like the culture of Charlie Partana here, Mediterranean culture, are prone to do this consciously by forcing the unwanted information out of consciousness. This is known as suppression. Repression buries painful and unpleasant material deep in the unconscious. The guilt which emerges from such a course of action is often vague and difficult to specify. Repression evokes feelings of guilt. There's the social sanction, the social control. Suppression, like with Charlie Partana, is dictated by external circumstances. But the thought of such actions is not excluded from consciousness. Suppression evokes feelings of shame. Traditionally, Enlightenment Western society, like our own, has been a guilt-oriented society. On the contrary, the primary social sanction of first century Mediterranean society was shame. So let's look at these three social sanctions, these three social controls: anxiety, shame, and guilt. In anxiety, the tribal person feels a loss of calm in a threat. In shame, the collectivist feels loss of face before persons. In guilt, the individualist, that's introspective, feels a loss of integrity in his own self-image. This makes sense? You see the difference? They're not the same. In anxiety, the tribal personality fears, is vulnerable in a way that is outside of control. In shame, the collectivist fails to an ideal or fails in his or her public exposure. In guilt, the introspective individualist feels condemned by Jiminy Cricket inside himself, what Freud calls the superego. See, the difference is that tribal personalities and collectivists are not introspective, are they? They're anti-introspective. There's a threat out there for the tribal, and the threat out there for the collectivist is to one's honor of one's group personality for the collectivist. It's a little bit more structured. They're actually very similar, the first two. In anxiety, the tribal personality is aroused by his environment. In shame, the collectivist is embarrassed by society. In guilt, the introspective individualist is pained by morality. In anxiety, the tribal personality has a primal emotion, the fear of losing his or her own being. In shame, the collectivist, the anti-introspective collectivist, experiences a total emotion, the fear of social rejection, thereby losing meaning. Guilt experienced by the introspective individualist is very specific emotion. Fear of judgment or correction. Fear of being a failure. In anxiety, the tribal personality is paralyzed. In shame, the anti-introspective collectivist is humiliated. In guilt, the introspective individualist is humbled. They're different, aren't they? In anxiety, the tribal personality wants to freeze, or tries to run, or seeks to fight. Flight or fight response. In shame, the anti-introspective collectivist wants to hide, tries to cover up, denies, lies to defend honor. Right? In guilt, the introspective individualist wants to justify, tries to rationalize, tries to make excuses. Yes? These are different personality types. Culture shapes what you can perceive, what you can think about, how you interpret, how you understand. I'm trying to show you how to understand John. Do you think that final column over on the right has anything to do with John and what we're learning? No. Is Jesus rationalizing in John when he's doing these defenses and saying, look, here's this witness, here's this witness, here's this witness? Where is it coming from? The middle tier. Now, there's a positive side to these social sanctions. Otherwise, they wouldn't have lasted, right? The positive side of anxiety for the tribal personality is that it energizes. It heightens awareness. Whoa, there's a jaguar. Right? The positive side of an anti-introspective collectivist is that it stirs him or her to discretion. It energizes honor. The positive side for an introspective individualist is it gives direction, urges integrity. There's also a negative side, though. Negatively, anxiety affects the tribal personality in that it distracts attention. I got this problem. Well, you have this thing too. For the collectivist, it disrupts social life, doesn't it? And guilt, shame for the collectivist disrupts social life, and guilt for the individualist destroys inner peace. What's the solution? Healing. But healing is different according to different strokes for different folks. Different cultural personalities require different healing methods. How do I get healed from anxiety if I'm a tribal personality? Well, the anxiety has to be released. Released. That is how healing comes to the anxious tribal personality. How do I get healed of shame from if I'm an anti-introspective collectivist, like all the people Jesus heals? Honor, one's standing in society, has to be regained. So the mother-in-law of Peter can no longer function in the household until Jesus exorcises the demon fever. And then what does she do immediately? She gets up and starts serving. That's regaining her honor. Does that work with us? We're individualists, we're introspective. We have to be internally healed. So we have guilt. Guilt needs to be forgiven. Guilt needs to be forgiven. The positive side of anxiety is a sense of security. The positive side of shame is honor. And the positive side of guilt is a sense of having done nothing wrong. The feeling of innocence. Or the feeling of winning. Right? Even better. Honor and shame were the core, the heart, the soul of social life in Mediterranean antiquity, the world of the Bible, the world of John. Concern for honor permeates every aspect of public life in the Mediterranean world. Hey, thanks for watching. Just continue the playlist for the next part of the study. If you have further questions, this is good. They will get addressed, so keep watching. If you found value, please subscribe, like, and share. As always, questions, comments, and criticisms are most welcome. God bless you.